Hey, what is up everyone? In today's video, I want to talk about why it's actually good for us as a community to complain or critique Sea of Thieves, and what Rare has been doing with the game. I see comments either on my own videos, on the forums, or just on social media in general, with other players of the game always trying to basically defend anything that Rare does, and essentially say that we should just be grateful that we're still getting anything at all. And I really think that thinking is just flawed in general, especially when you consider that there's two sides that you can talk about this. One, from the business side, we are the customers. We're telling them what we want in order for us to keep paying and supporting the game. Now, whether you bought the game outright or you are playing through Game Pass, you have essentially paid for your initial access to the game already. Yes, if you're on Game Pass, you're still kind of continuously paying for that. But for the sake of argument, let's just go ahead and say that, we basically already paid for our access to the game many years ago. The game has been out for a long time now. I do think that people like myself who have paid for the game initially have gotten their money's worth from playing the game. We've had many great years of Sea of Thieves prior to the last few years that were really great and enjoyable times to play Sea of Thieves and made it to one of my favorite games I've ever played. But with Sea of Thieves being a live service game, we're looking at the continuation of the game. We're not looking at just some past game. This isn't the same as like saying if I were to go and talk about why isn't Spider-Man 2018, that PlayStation release, why is that still not getting content updates that are, big and massive or anything? No, there's no expectation for continued content on that game because that's a standalone product. They added a few DLCs after it released, and that's it. There's no more continuation of that game, and everyone understands that because it's not that type of game. Sea of Thieves, on the other hand, is the type of game that keeps going. Now, the way that they've been able to fund the continuation of Sea of Thieves is through microtransactions in the game in the form of cosmetics. Recently, we've been seeing some other types of microtransactions in the game, but for a second, let's just focus on the cosmetics. I have stayed pretty solid on this stance that I am perfectly fine with paying for cosmetics here and there for live service games. With Fortnite, with Sea of Thieves, those are the two main ones I play. I think it's a good way to keep a game going. If they're going to keep providing content, I'm happy with supporting the developers by buying like a, ship figurehead or a sail or just something here and there. But the problem is we have to keep the game going in order for it to make any sense to keep buying cosmetics for the game. Why would I buy cosmetics for a game if the game is just going downhill further and further? If you no longer are playing the game, why would you spend money on it? So in one way, critiquing them is to help them in order to keep them profitable and keep making money. The other side of it, and I kind of just talked about it a moment ago, is if you're a player of Sea of Thieves, you want to see the game continue to grow and get better over time. Yes, you can be appreciative of, the past memories that you've had with the game. I've talked before, I think some of my favorite times playing Sea of Thieves was back in 2020. I feel like that's when the game was at its peak, and I have some really great memories of going into battles with some of my friends and that kind of stuff during that time. And there's still good moments that I have even since then, over the last few years of the game, but those favorite moments are becoming fewer and fewer as time has gone on. And a lot of that has to do with what Sea of Thieves has been doing with the game and the waning interest of people with Sea of Thieves. Now, I don't think people are losing interest in Sea of Thieves because they are just burnt out with it. There might be a little bit of that. If someone's been playing Sea of Thieves basically every day for the last 6 or 7 years or so, yeah, you probably will get a little bit tired and want to play something else. But I think really the main part of why people are just getting tired and bored of Sea of Thieves is because they aren't really adding or innovating with the game anymore. But when you start critiquing that, and as you can see on my channel, if you've been subscribed to me for a while, I try to have a little bit more of a balanced take. I try to be fair to what they are including and what they're doing with the game, while also critiquing the stuff that I disagree with them doing. And I try to be fair in that sense. But there are some people that are either always hating on the game and anything that they do is completely bad and terrible. But then there's the flip side where there's people that say that basically anything that they do is great and amazing. Now, I want to give you an example of when critiquing something in the game has actually led to that being improved later on. So if you've been following my channel for a while now, you know that typically with every season release, we have a new plunder pass that I do before you buy guide on. I usually just give my thoughts on what do I think about the pass, do I think it's a good value, and just my general thoughts on it. Now, something that I was complaining about very early on with the plunder pass is that they needed to have enough ancient coins to match the price of purchase for the plunder pass. This would bring it in line with other games like, say, Fortnite and stuff, which even Fortnite gives you about 1.5 times your value in terms of what you paid for it in the premium currency in the game. So even Sea of Thieves isn't even making it to that point. But what I wanted from the game from the beginning was it to match the price of purchase. And it took a few seasons, but eventually, enough complaining about it and critiquing the game for it ended up with us getting that. We got it now so that in the new system, every plunder pass has 750 ancient coins in the plunder pass and then 250 in the free pass. And that's great. That makes it so that if you play the game and you complete the pass every season, you can get the next season's pass without having to spend extra money on the game. Now, if you want to go and buy stuff in the Pirate Emporium or other stuff, or if you maybe bought like a figurehead, yeah, you'll have to spend a little bit of money to be able to make up for that, but I think that's fine. So that's an example of being outspoken and talking about stuff that we don't like that they're doing with the game actually paid off and they actually listened to us in the end. But now the issue is because there's so many people that basically want to say everything that they do is great, like especially I got a lot of pushback with the Hunter's Call update earlier this year because there's fans of the Hunter's Call that were just desperate to get anything. So they were pretty much just fine taking recycled content that was a little bit more polished up rather than demand something that's actually worth it for a Hunter's Call update. You can go back and watch some of my earlier videos from the year, and I talked about many ideas that they could have done for the Hunter's Call that would have been very substantial and actually made those Hunter's Call players really happy. But what we got is just a lot of reskin content. And something that I think people misunderstand about my point on reskin content, there's nothing inherently wrong with taking some stuff that you've already developed and then kind of retooling it to be able to work a little bit differently so that it's kind of a newish thing that you can do. My stance has always been that reskin content can always be really good for the game if you package it with something that's actually new and genuinely unique. When you do that and you package them together, it makes for a really big update rather than just having that new and unique feature on its own. So it can be a really good method of making really big season updates, and I think that could have really worked. If we got something that was like one or two really big things for that Hunter's Call update earlier this year, for example, maybe if we got like a new sea monster, not a reskinned ancient megalodon, but we got, like a sea serpent, or what I would really love, I'd love to have like a giant crab, kind of like what we saw like in Moana or something. If you took that and then packaged it in with, say, the Hunter's Call emissary and then the fishing voyages and stuff, that would have been a great season. And I don't think there would have been complaints about it. But when you only focus on reskin content and maybe one or two small little additions that are genuinely new, like the boar hunting, it's just not going to be satisfying to anyone. And I think you can actually see this. So what I did was I pulled up Google Trends, and if you're not familiar with Google Trends, one thing that you can do with it is you basically type in any sort of topic. So I put in Sea of Thieves here, and you can put it in a time range, and I have set this to YouTube searches because I'm more concerned with YouTube, but you can set this to other things like Google searches or image searches, that kind of stuff. Now I started a little bit before Sea of Thieves released back in 2017 is when I started this. And you can see when Sea of Thieves released in March 2018, that was when it was at peak popularity in terms of YouTube searches, which makes sense. But really what we're looking for is we're not looking too much at the peaks because there's going to be peaks around like different season releases and that kind of stuff. You can see a little bit higher interest between 2019 and 2021. And those all make sense. And I believe if we go down here, we can see like when the PlayStation release was May 2024, around that time, April 2024, you see like a big increase. That's when all the PlayStation players were getting added, probably looking up how-to guides, that kind of stuff. So that makes sense for that increase. But really what I want you to notice with this is we're seeing a downturn. So even like at these points, these were pretty high points for them in 2022. 2020 was some of the best points in terms of consistently being high. But then if we start going towards later on, 2023 starts going down a pretty good amount. We have a little bit of boost from the PlayStation release, and then following the PlayStation release, it's just an endless downward turn to now, if we look back towards like around April, which pretty much lines up with what I was kind of saying in terms of like when I got really over some of the stuff that they've been doing with the game, and even April 2025 is when I took a break from Sea of Thieves actually. That is when it really starts going downhill, and it's kind of at its lowest point. And if you're wondering what these numbers are, so basically what it does is it's a percentage of what your peak was. So the peak obviously was when the game first released, and that's 100%. We can see with the PlayStation release, that was about 42% of its initial peak, but now we're just kind of going down, and we're just like at 13%, even recently going down to 12%, 9% for last September. It's just not a good situation for Sea of Thieves. And this also is even worse for someone like me or other Sea of Thieves content creators, because if people aren't interested in Sea of Thieves content on YouTube, well, that means views are going to go down, and essentially you either have to choose to give up on YouTube, stop completely, or you have to switch and pivot to some type of other content, whether it's a new game or, you know, different style of content. But Sea of Thieves is not cutting it anymore. And I think this is really sad, because what I would really love to do is I would love to just keep talking about Sea of Thieves, giving idea videos, and just talking about new content added to the game. And I could do that for a long time. I would love to just keep playing the game and enjoying it and doing that kind of content. But you can't really keep that up if the audience isn't there. And I'm very curious to see how this video does, to be honest, but it wouldn't surprise me with how low the audience is getting for Sea of Thieves just in terms of YouTube. And I feel like YouTube is a good indicator of the interest of Sea of Thieves players going on. And I think if you are a Sea of Thieves player and you're being honest about how they've been handling the game, it's pretty clear why the game has been on a downturn over the last few years. Think about most of the content that gets added. I would say Season 13 is one of the better updates that we've gotten over the last few years, but even that, I feel like the Burning Blade in concept is a great idea, but in execution was a bit flawed. But that was genuinely a new thing added to the game, and I think Skeleton Camps were a really cool addition too. Both of those, though, I feel like haven't really had a great long-lasting legacy where people continuously do them just because of how they were executed. The Burning Blade is just not something that people care about too much. I think there's some people that are still trying to get their commendations done, but I feel like once you get the commendation done, who's really caring about, you know, either going up against the Burning Blade or just getting the Burning Blade and doing the Skeleton Camps in general. But you look at other updates since then, and let's be honest, outside of new tools and how to do things in the game, what is genuinely new that was like significantly added to the game? Smuggling voyages this year were just cargo voyages, but reskinned content in that sense. We have the latest event that went on, which I actually liked it, but that is another reskin content where we just took a C4 and replaced the enemies with skeletons instead of the phantoms for whatever reason, I guess. You have the Hunter's Call update that had the Megs that were just basically regular Megs, but with a few little buffs to them. There's just nothing inherently new for us to do. Now, I think the Devil's Roar update that we're getting for Season 18, it sounds like there's some new stuff that's going on for it. I'm interested in the Ashen Garrisons that they talked about for it, but we're gonna have to wait and see for that. But I think they've pushed it off for too long to really be adding genuinely new content that is interesting to people. We've gone through multiple years of just stagnation for Sea of Thieves, and that's very clear in the viewership. But this isn't the only problem. It's not just stagnation in the content. It's also where has their priorities gone to. Now, recently I did a video reviewing their new audio update for the game, and there were people on that video that were commenting basically saying that why is anyone complaining? Everyone's spending like so much money on cosmetics in the game. This is just a drop in the bucket basically, so why even complain about them charging money for it? And I wasn't necessarily complaining that they were charging any money for it. My complaint was if they're going to charge money for it, it needs to be a substantial update that's worth paying extra for. So that was my only argument with that, but that is kind of a clear indication of where some of the Sea of Thieves player base is at, where if you even try to critique anything as mildly as that video was, which I feel like that was somewhat of a mild critique of the new audio plugin, even with that, you can see people that are just going to push back and basically try to defend Sea of Thieves at whatever cost. And that has, I think, made Sea of Thieves a lot more bold in terms of really trying to monetize the game without actually providing anything. So we already mentioned the audio plugin update, which I don't think we have a price yet for how much that's actually going to cost. But we also had pirate profiles that got added, which usually is a standard feature in other games. But for Sea of Thieves, they're going to charge us extra for every single save file that we want to have for Sea of Thieves. I don't even think it's really that necessary of an update and probably was a waste of development time. But even still, if they're going to put that development time in, it seems like it's a feature that probably should just be included in the purchase of the game. But then we also have the upcoming custom servers that's going to be part of some new Sea of Thieves subscription. And that I also think is a little bit problematic when you take in everything that they've been doing. There's been a heavy focus on moving away from cosmetic-based monetization, which I think goes back to my earlier point that if people are spending less time playing the game, there's less reason and incentive to buy new cosmetics. So in turn, they're trying to take the people that still play the game and basically upcharge them to other stuff like better audio or different save files or whatever the case may be. But really what it's emboldened them to do is take update videos, like this recent update video from this week, which I already knew this probably wasn't going to be a good video, but it's a 4-minute long video, which I think is bad in any case, that if we're having like a big brand new monthly update and the video is only 4 minutes long, that kind of should indicate to you that there's not much that they're adding to this. So there's been a lot of complaints on that video that I was looking at that talked about how, so they have the content update here, which is the Reaper Fortresses. It starts at 20 seconds in, and then it goes to about 50 seconds in. So 30 seconds to talk about the new content added to the game. Okay, maybe they have a lot to cover in this video, so they're really trying to use their time wisely. Maybe that's what it is. So what were they trying to save their time for this 4-minute long video? Well, of course, the Pirate Emporium, which they start talking about at a minute 28, and they go all the way until 3:10 as when they stop talking about it. Basically, over half of the video's length is dedicated to Pirate Emporium stuff. I think this gets even worse when you factor in the Ghoul and Glory weekend that they're adding. This was something that also got a little bit of a mention here. It's basically just a double XP weekend for the game, but they're just rebranding it for Halloween. I want you to remember back years ago, we used to have this magical thing called the Festival of the Dam. This used to be an actual event in the game where we had, new type of limited time activities that we could do that were all ghostly themed. And then we also had a bunch of really cool in-game rewards that you can unlock, including the Soul Flame costume, which was an amazing reward. Nowadays, you're not getting that. You don't even get a login bonus. Even when they stopped caring about the Halloween updates each year, they at least were giving us like some kind of login bonus, like that ghostly cutlass that we had gotten like for logging in, I think either last year or 2 years ago. This year, you get nothing. There's nothing to get for this Halloween event. It makes you beg the question, why even have an event going on? And for the people that say that, there's no real reason for them to keep going on and spending development time, doing like a limited time event for the season, I think that's really misguided. But you can also just look at one, they've already made a commitment to doing limited time content every season. We just saw it right now with this new smuggling event that's going on. But I also think you can look at other games. Look at something like Fortnite, which, Fortnite's been out even longer than Sea of Thieves. And they still are bringing out all the stops every year for these Fortnitemares, which is their version of the Festival of the Dam, where they are adding new items to the game, new limited time modes, there's tons of new cool cosmetics, and there's a lot of free cosmetics that you can unlock in the game. I know that Sea of Thieves and Fortnite are hard comparisons to make sometimes because Fortnite is just such a bigger game as opposed to Sea of Thieves. That doesn't negate the fact that they are competing for the same audience attention. So when we have Sea of Thieves that is doing nothing for Halloween, and Fortnite that has a bunch of stuff going on for Halloween, well, guess where I'm going to be spending my time? I'm going to be spending on Fortnite. I make that critique not because I'm trying to, glaze Fortnite or whatever. It's because I want Sea of Thieves to be able to compete on a player attention side of things during these seasonal events. And I think it's a really bad sign. We've already seen not only the cuts to the Festival of the Dam, but look at the Festival of Giving that we usually have for our Christmas event. That was basically non-existent last year, and I would doubt that we see anything for this year. Maybe there's going to be enough backlash for people with the Halloween event this year that maybe they'll try to step it up a little bit more for Christmas, but at this point I really don't see it. And I think it's almost an insult to injury when you look at, they actually named one of the bundles for the Pirate Emporium update for this month, the Festival of the Dam. They're rubbing salt in the wound with this. When they take something that used to mean, a new content update with really cool additions, with, limited time stuff, spookiness all around in the game, and now it's just, hey, here's a way to spend more money for us. I think this game has gotten into a terrible state, and really at this point, you either have to complain about it or you just have to leave. And I think that's the two spots that we're in right now. Now, I think you're still able to enjoy Sea of Thieves. I get on and I still have a good time when I play, but it's definitely not the same as it used to be. The game has gotten worse over time. And it doesn't help the fact that there's really no hope for the game right now. I'm not saying that you can't hope for the game, but I'm just saying based on what they've actually announced and what they are showing off to us about what their priorities are and what their content plans are for the game, there is nothing really to be hopeful for. At best, you can maybe potentially be a little bit hopeful for some of the storyline stuff because it seems like, there might be the return of the Dark Brethren. It seems like the Smugglers League are somehow involved with that. That's the most hopeful you can get, that maybe the storyline gets a little bit better going forward because it's basically taken a huge dip since the adventures were discontinued. Overall, I just wanted to make this video because I see this sentiment a lot that you shouldn't be complaining about Sea of Thieves. We should just be grateful for everything they still give us. And I really just feel like that's a flawed concept. Not only are we the customers and that we are paying for this, whether you're paying for your access through Game Pass or you're paying for cosmetics to play in this game, there's an expectation that they are going to continue adding content to the game. And they're just doing below the bare minimum. I also think for myself, it's a little bit more personal for someone like me because I am a Sea of Thieves YouTuber. I've been making content on the game for over 5 years now. And I'm at the point where it is just not even really feasible, and it wasn't ever really feasible for me in the first place. It's not like I was making, good money or anything from YouTube, but we're at the point where, see these videos, they just don't do well anymore. So I'm really at the point where unless Rare starts really changing and course correcting very quickly, I'm at the point where I have to make a big decision on whether or not it's worth time to keep investing in making Sea of Thieves content. But that's all I have for this video. I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on this topic and just in general your thoughts on the state of the community and how there's these different sides that are either super against Rare and everything that they do, or the people that basically think that they can never do any wrong. I'd like to hear y'all's thoughts on that dichotomy that we're seeing with the Sea of Thieves community and just your general thoughts on the state of the game. But that's all I have for this video. If you enjoyed, it'd be great if you have to like and subscribe. And until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all later. Bye, y'all.